Welcome back to another episode of the Education Exchange. I'm Sara Clawson, Public Relations and Marketing Specialist for the Tolleson Union High School District. Today, Superintendent Jeremy Calles is here to talk about the undermining of public education. Ouch. This sounds like a pretty heavy topic and something that the media would report on. What do you want to specifically talk about?
In our last episode, we had touched on a few things: the Auditor General's performance audits, the DEI letters, the stuff that's going around, and I'll be hitting media soon on superintendent's pay. So mostly starting with those three main topics.
Let's talk about AG performance audits. What does that mean, and how is it helping to undermine public education?
All right. So if you go onto the Auditor General's website, so azauditor.gov, you can pull up on their website reports about all the different school districts. And what you're going to find is that they conduct these performance audits, and so districts are randomly chosen. So for those who aren't watching the video, I got the air quotes going. The districts are randomly chosen for these performance audits, and in each of those performance audits, they will go through a checklist of things that they are going to critique districts on, along with any other additional information that was supplied to them prior to going out to that district for the performance audit. I know when I was at Department of Education, I worked closely with the Auditor General's office and the identification of districts and these performance audits. So I've seen it from the other side on how it's working. I have since had numerous conversations with them about the way the documentation is done on the end, because in the end, when you read any of these performance audits, like you never read one and think, oh, well, that one seems like a good district.
They're doing it right. Yeah,
that there's nothing in there acknowledging what they're doing right. It is like, oh, here's another district that doesn't know how to provide education. That's the way they all read, and they are only looking for things to criticize, and there's nothing in there where it's like, these are best practices. This is how we could write a document that's going to help all of the other districts get better, right? Here's something that this district is doing. Everybody should be doing this. We want to make sure all of you know about it because all of you should be doing this. This district is doing it right. It's all about just bashing the district. And I brought that up with the Auditor General's office before, and they reminded me that there is a legislative subcommittee who oversees them and their performance audits. And so the political tone for how these need to read is already preset in the background. So whenever a performance audit is coming your way, I'm sure we'll see one again real soon. They're going out there specifically to find things to criticize you on. In some cases, even justify taking away funding from districts. It can spin off into other audits, like ADM audits, like other audits can come after your performance audit. And so sometimes you'll find districts that they are going through 3, 4, 5 different audits at the same time, looking at all their practices and finding ways to condemn what they're doing and to take away funding.
Do you know when our last performance audit was?
I don't have the date on the last Tolleson Union performance audit. The last time I personally went through a performance audit was back at my previous district right before coming to Tolleson Union. So, I have experienced a performance audit before, but I'd have to check to find the last time that Tolleson was pulled up.
Okay. I was just a little curious to see what kind of evaluation they would give our district, knowing that it's not our current district, but what some of the things were that they might have found.
Some of the stuff, can be trivial items like the length of passwords for employees wasn't long enough or reset often enough. And some of the things can be more significant. They can look at how you're spending money and say, you know what, this district spends too much money on food service, or this district spends too much money on transportation. They spend more than their peers, and they should change their program so they would spend less than their peers. So a lot of it is motivated around that. The whole intent with performance audits, they were implemented with Classroom Site Fund, and that's when we first started adopting reports that show us the spending of dollars on instruction and the percentages that we track from year to year, and you'll hear hit the media from year to year. The whole point of the performance audits was to improve those percentages, which hasn't happened. So, newsflash, bashing everybody does not all of a sudden make everybody do better. Like that was they were coupled together, they came into existence together, and that was the intent. It was this, if we're monitoring performance, you know, you expect what you inspect. Performance will go up because of the fact that we're doing performance audits. We'll get more dollars into the classroom because of the fact that we're doing performance audits. That hasn't been the result. And instead what we see is legislative bills drafted where they're referencing information that was brought forward through a performance audit.
Okay, so the performance audit is really how the district is functioning and operating, but not the academic performance of our students, which is a different rating system, right?
Yes, that's a different rating system, but inside a performance audit, you could see references to the academic performance of the district. So
Okay.
when they're looking at performance, they don't narrow their scope. They have everything encompassed in their scope. So
Okay.
you really don't know what you're going to get once the performance audit gets out there.
So I bring that up just because I do know that news reports, we're always talking about how a district is rated or how a school is rated because it matters. People want to know
Yes.
when they're choosing their child's education that it's a quote unquote good school district, right? Like they perform well, they're A rated.
Yep.
And so that I think is adding to the dialogue in the public about where to go, where their kids should go to school, and which district is doing well and which district is not. So moving on, we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion letters. This was in the news last month, and we had an option to sign the certification that says we're in compliance with the new mandate, and we chose not to. Let's talk about that issue specifically and how it might undermine public education.
Yeah. So while many districts voted to sign the DEI letters, there's a good handful who didn't, or who voted to sign the DEI letter, but later on retracted that vote. And the superintendent Tom Horn is keeping that on his webpage to let everybody know who's not signing, who the holdouts are. We're one of them. So our district did not necessarily have the governing board vote on sign or not sign. Our governing board voted to give me that discretion and to trust my judgment. And the initial reaction I gave to them on that April 23rd meeting was that I was not going to sign that letter. And that's, we post our board meetings on our website. Anybody could see our meeting when we had that discussion. And so with the DEI letters, it is creating this threat of if you do not sign this letter, you're subject to losing all your federal funds. If you do sign this letter and you do anything that we deem as illegal DEI, not only will you lose all your federal funds that will go back and retroactively take them from you, but we will also impose other civil penalties and treble damages for the fact that we believe you have submitted a false claim to us. And so in addition to losing all your federal funds, we're going to fine you on top of that. There's no win there.
They sound like a bully.
Yes. And it's like, do this, sign this letter that is agreeing that whenever I come to you and I say, I want you to stop doing that, I think that's illegal DEI, you're agreeing that you will keep changing how you run your district on how I see fit, or we're taking away all your money.
And so at this point, there's been an injunction, correct?
Yeah, so we got lucky. We didn't know the injunction was coming on the day that we made our decision. So we made our decision on the night of the 23rd. By the morning of the 24th, some prayers answered because injunction shows up and it's going around everywhere that next morning that they weren't going to be able to take federal funds immediately. So this is going to play out in the courts for a while, and then we'll see what happens with the courts. But right now, we're not at immediate risk of losing federal funding. It doesn't mean that we're not still going to come under attack for not signing the letter, and it doesn't mean that they won't get to a point where courts rule that they could possibly do this to us and take away federal funding for not signing a letter. So we're gonna have to see how that plays out in the court. But there is an injunction right now.
How much money would we lose?
For our district, it could be up to $21 million if it was every federal dollar. It really just depends on how they would apply it. So that we don't know. We don't know which federal funds. Is it truly all federal funds? So we'd have to wait and see when there's more information and more documentation. But that's the spot they put districts in is either you're going to put your federal funding at risk and have people told that you are being discriminatory because you have DEI practices, or you're going to put your students at risk because you're going to agree to, I will not do anything deemed illegal DEI, and between your students and staff, things that you are doing to help protect students and staff, take care of students and staff, all of a sudden someone's going to come in and tell you, nope, we think those things are illegal, stop doing them. So, it's really a situation where there isn't a perfect solution. Either way, you can paint each district as a bad guy.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that some of the federal funding they're discussing as far as the DEI issue is helping students who might have special needs, or McKinney-Vento students, those who might be unhoused and they don't have, proper transportation to school, or food and resources like that. So those vulnerable populations are the ones who may be affected most if we don't receive federal funding.
Absolutely. Most of the federal funds are aimed at helping the vulnerable, disadvantaged populations of students. And so those funds would be at risk. But when funding is lost, it isn't just, so for instance, let's say if they took away all of our special education funding tomorrow, we are not going to stop servicing our special education students. We are going to give them the services that they need, and we would have to find another means to do that, even if that meant that we were going to offer less across the board so we could take care of the vulnerable population. So even though those are targeted towards those different populations, it would be an impact for all students in the event that the funding went away. They also, there's a strict scrutiny clause that's supposed to be exempt from discrimination. They haven't explained how strict scrutiny is going to work with their illegal DEI concept. But some of our funds are restricted to those populations, for special education, for Native American students. Like, some funding that we receive from the federal government literally restricts it to, these are the only students that the funding can be used on. But then their letter states, if you're doing that, then that's illegal DEI. So it's very contradictory with how they're handing out money and then saying that we want to take away money. So it's something that we need to continue to work through, and obviously districts will be in the target for that one.
All right, so the last thing that we want to talk about is superintendent's pay. Your contract, several other superintendents in the state, their contract is under scrutiny. The media wants to know how much you get paid.
Yes, which we've always complied with every public records request. Goldwater, I think, was the first one to ask for my contract. They got it pretty quickly, and it's not something I shy away from or ever feel shameful about. But I do want to share a few things as people are hearing about superintendent's pay across the state. I want the average person to be able to put it into context, and I actually want to issue a challenge out to the media. And so I'm going to go through something first, and then I'll tell you about my challenge to the media. Okay. So first, when you're evaluating salaries for any positions, not just superintendents, I've done compensation studies for other districts and other entities. There are multiple ways that you can go about it. One is to do a market study, right? So if we were to do a market study and we're trying to figure out what should the superintendent of Tolleson be making, you're going to want to find some comps, right? Some comparable positions in other organizations. If we were doing it for someone that we're going to hire in food services, we're not just going to look at food services in other school districts. What are they getting paid? But we know that Panda Express down the street will pay someone $20.50 to go cook for them. If Panda's paying over $20 for people to cook for them, to me, it seems a little easier to go cook at Panda than it does to cook in our cafeterias. Are we competitive with Panda when we're going after a cook? Are we competitive with Culliver's when we're going out for a cook? So you're going to want some mix of who else in the region is going to be taking our employees. And so you're going to want to look at similar job function, but maybe it's in a different setting, like a private setting. So you're going to want to look at that. For the superintendent, that means that you're not just looking at district superintendents, you're also looking at charter operators, and you're going to look at nonprofits, right? So you want to look at nonprofits like Goodwill, Salvation Army. What are the CEOs and those nonprofit organizations making? Because there'll be a similar comp, and you're going to want to look at things like what's the employee count, what's the annual funds that are being managed, like different things that make the job look comparable. Now, one variable that is unique to school districts is that you have districts that are either growing, declining, or stagnant. When your student population is constant, right, that's a lot easier to run because you don't need to hire new staff. You don't need to figure out who you're getting rid of. You're keeping the same staff. You're keeping your operation pretty constant. But when you're declining or when you're growing, there are different types of challenges involved with declining and growing districts. So that should also be taken into consideration when you're figuring out who's a valid comp. It's not as easy as just looking at student count and saying, well, Mesa has the highest student count in the state, therefore they should have the highest paid superintendent in the state. It doesn't work quite that way. It would also be good to put some national context around a study of that nature. So if you're going to do a market study, I get offers all the time to go be a superintendent in other states. I'm not leaving Arizona. It's my home. My family's here. Like, obviously, I'm staying put. But you're going to want to do some national comparisons, and within those national studies, you'll see that Arizona pays significantly less towards administrative costs than other states. That means that you either have less people who are doing the administrative work, or you are just paying your people less. But either way, we're well below the national averages. But you'll want to incorporate that into a market study if you're looking at this with a market study. Another method is to look at the historical pay rate for the position. And historically, for that specific entity, where have you been paying, and how has that grown in comparison to other positions within your organization? And then you start to look a little bit more closely at internal equity. So I can use Tolleson as an example and tell you how I would put the numbers together if I was doing the study. When we get into historical pay rate and we get into internal equity, back in 2017, Tolleson was paying base salary for the superintendent $220,000. That was very comparable. So if a market study conducted in 2017 would show that was very comparable to similar size districts. And when you looked at that and how it grew, the contract language is always stated in the superintendent's contract that the superintendent receives the same raise as the other certified staff and other employees of the district. So the superintendent does not get a separate and distinct raise. They get a raise that's similar to the rest of the employees.
It's not a one-time bonus.
Yeah. And so since 2017, our district has done the most with increasing employee salaries for all employees, which would include the superintendent. But I want to give some examples. So if we look at the superintendent's salary, base salary was $220,000 in 2017. And in 2025, the base salary was $334,800. That is an increase of 52% over that span, which absolutely that's a pretty sizable increase for that span. But when we go to give that context, we looked at a teacher's salary who was here in 2017, about an average teacher. So, and this is a very specific person. I won't say the name, of course, but they were making $36,417 in 2017. They're in the same position, and they in 2025 they were making $81,768. That is a 125% increase. We looked at an admin assistant for one of our sites. In 2017, she was making $41,018, $19.72 an hour. In 2025, she's making $81,432 at $39 an hour. That's a 98% increase. We looked at a bookstore manager who in 2017 was making $36,088, $17.30 an hour, and in 2025 making $73,017 at $34.97 an hour. That is a 102% increase. We looked at a bus monitor that in 2017 was making $11.37 an hour. In 2025, making $28.31 an hour. That is a 149% increase. So when you look at the internal equity for our district, the internal equity since 2017 has improved significantly. One of the things that you saw come out in the media when there was a bunch of employee strikes in other industries was that you had CEOs who were making 200 to 300 times their average employee. And they said the industry standard, if you go cross industry, should be 10 to 1. The top executive should not be making more than 10 times the average employee. And so if you look at our district, our average teacher salary is $80,000. That would be a number of $800,000. I don't make $800,000. Our teachers are also on a 187-day contract. All of our 12-month employees are on a 260-day contract. If you annualize that $80,000 out to the 260 days, you're at $111,000. And either way, if you're sticking with it at 80, going with it at 111, you're looking at 4.5 to 3.5 times the average employee, well below the 10 to 1 ratio that's seen cross industry. Another way to look at doing an assessment of a superintendent's salary would be through job evaluation. What have been their accomplishments? What's noted that would give rise to the significance of the pay? When you look at my own personal accomplishments with the district, and when I say my own, I mean through my teams that I've led and the efforts that I've led, the district has received 5 credit rating upgrades. We are the highest rated district in the state. We have a AAA with Moody's, which is the top of the ladder for them. That's like basically having a friend who has an 850 credit score.
Yeah.
So, originally when I came over from Kyrene Elementary over to Tolleson Union, I told the rating analyst, I was like, my credit rating comes with me. They laughed. They thought I was joking. They're like, that you don't have the wealth and the population that you had in Kyrene. I go, I understand that, but the rating comes with me. And 5 credit rating upgrades later, we're there, equal to what you would see in Kyrene, Scottsdale, Chandler, those areas. So there's the credit rating upgrades. When you look at the way our funding comes to us, you have the per pupil formula. Then you have everything extra that you have to work for, right? Whether it's bonds, overrides, school facilities board money, that extra piece. In the 8 years prior to me coming to the district brought in $60 million. In the 8 years that I've been here, we've brought in $960 million. It's a $900 million upgrade from how we were running things before.
That's amazing.
Now, some of that includes the award that we just got this past December. So as I was sent home on admin leave by my former governing board president, I went to the school facilities board meeting that occurred during that time. They had as agendized to be put on hold once again for our new high school. I was able to present to them and talk them into voting for our new high school, which gave us a $125 million award to use towards our new high school. On the academic side of things, we have West Point. Our first comprehensive high school has just moved up to an A this year. We have reason to believe that we're going to have at least one and maybe even two more schools move up to an A the next time letter grades are released. So we're very excited about what's going to come out on the next round of letter grades. There are different creative deals that we're working currently in the background. I think right now we're far enough into the legislative session that I can talk more publicly about it, but we are working on an affordable housing development that not only would provide affordable housing for our staff and our community members, but also would net the district $4 million up front and an ongoing revenue of $250,000 with a 3% escalator. So we're putting that together. The district would financially benefit from that, but also our community and some of our staff members will be able to benefit from that.
We're going to have to talk about that again soon.
Yes.
I have a lot of questions.
When it opens. So, if you're going based on merit, yes, I could go on and on with the list of merit to explain why my pay is the way that it is. But my challenge is to not have me do all the homework. My challenge is to the media. I want to see if anyone in the media can give an assessment to that level of detail, a fair look at that level of detail. If you're going to do it based on market study, can we have media who will look at what some of the charter owner operators who are similarly sized or smaller are making, right? We had 12 News reported about Primavera and how much they were making. And I realize it's more complicated to get their numbers because it can be done through dividends, shareholder distributions. But I put a challenge out to media. If you're going to do it through market study, get the full market. If you're going to do it through internal equity, look at those ratios by district, look at those ratios within the charter system, within private schools, like go more in depth, like be investigative, give a more fair comparison. And if we can have any media outlet go to that level of detail to give a fair analysis of where we are with paying superintendents versus paying CEOs, presidents, owner operators in these other systems, I am more than willing to come on and do an interview with them and answer any questions they have on the topic.
And maybe a challenge to our public is pay closer attention to your school districts and the good that's coming from them.
Yes, absolutely. And when you hear things like Google, do your own fact checking. It's
multiple sources.
Yes, it's so easy to find, countering opinions or additional data. Like it's all at the push of our finger on our cell phones. When something gives you that shock factor, be like, well, how much of that is really true? And let me put that into context.
Not everybody can be a superintendent.
Yes. Being a superintendent means that you're going to work for 5 locally elected political officials, and it's got its own very difficult task just with that alone. But then you also are under the public eye, the public scrutiny. You have to work with legislators downtown. There's a lot of stuff that happens in the background that people don't see and is not quite as enjoyable as when they may see me on campus smiling, shaking hands, and waving at everyone. So definitely a difficult position.
And that's a wrap. Thank you for joining us today on the Education Exchange, where we aim to enlighten our parents and empower our students. And that's the end of our show. Thank you for listening. If you have questions, want more information, or would like to be a guest on the Education Exchange, please send us an email at podcast@tuhsd.org. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and tune in next week to the Education Exchange. You can catch all episodes on your favorite streaming devices or directly at www.tuhsd.org/podcast.